At 14, my parents made me sign a $600 rent contract or leave home. A week later, a lawyer's letter landed on their table, and their faces went pale. My mother told me one day when signing a permission card that now that I'm 12, I can buy my own school lunch. We're not made of money, and you should understand the importance of hard work. That's when Mother stopped purchasing me basic school materials. When I requested for fresh notebooks and pencils, she replied, "Figure it out. Other kids your age have jobs, so you should consider getting one too." I felt perplexed and embarrassed asking instructors for more materials as my father watched his costly sports package, which cost more per month than the whole school supply list. They had recently purchased a new 60-inch television but were unable to buy a $10 box of pencils. I started babysitting on weekends and walking dogs after school to cover the cost of basic essentials like clothing and food. The embarrassment of wearing too short pants and hole-filled shoes seared in my chest, but I attempted to seem normal. "Look at our little entrepreneur," Dad would say when I arrived home fatigued from work. "Maybe you'll realize why we can't just offer you whatever you want." I'd grin and nod while calculating how to make $25 last for a week of meals. By 13, they had stopped buying me meals and were ordering takeout twice a week for themselves. I'd arrive home hungry to find them devouring restaurant food and empty cabinets. Mom would tell you that you could get a job at the grocery store and purchase your own food like an adult while eating her Chinese takeout. The fragrance of their food made my stomach hurt. But I learned to stay in my room until they were finished, so I didn't have to watch them eat stuff I couldn't afford. I became better at money management than my parents ever were because I had to make every dollar count. While they impulsively purchased electronics and restaurant meals, I investigated each purchase and sought the greatest value. I developed a little business doing yard work and pet sitting that made great money. The irony was that as a teenager, I demonstrated more financial discipline than they did as adults. They still criticized me for being poor since I wore thrift shop clothing. Mom remarked it's humiliating to have a daughter who dresses like she's homeless when I wore a second-hand outfit to a family gathering. "People are going to think we don't take care of you." I wanted to shout since they didn't take care of me and hadn't purchased me clothing in 2 years. Dad would moan to his buddies about how costly children were, while I sat there knowing I had been financially independent since middle school. I extended my business and began generating real money by providing lawn care and pet services to most of the neighborhood. My parents acted as if my achievement was due to their tough love style. Dad would warn people, "Watch what happens when you stop enabling kids and make them work for what they want. She understands the worth of $1, unlike these spoilt brats whose parents give them everything," he added while drinking $40 bottles of wine and playing golf at the country club. But then Dad lost his job and their attitude toward money shifted dramatically. "We're having financial difficulties," Mom stated, and she asked if I might lend them money for groceries. "Just until your father discovers something new." I watched them panic about missing their mortgage payment while I had spent years budgeting down to the last penny. They had no savings despite earning a respectable living because they had spent every dollar on wants rather than requirements. Dad replied, "You've got all that money sitting in your account," when I refused to give them cash. During difficult times, family members support one another. I reminded him that when I was 12, I was supposed to help my family and eat peanut butter for dinner every night. "That was different because we were teaching you responsibility," Mom remarked, as if that made sense. "This is an actual emergency." They continued asking for money every few days and becoming angry when I declined. Dad stated, "You're being selfish and ungrateful after everything we've done for you," during one of his pleading bouts. "We could have booted you out years ago, but we allowed you to stay here for free." I explained that allowing your minor child to live in your home was the legal minimal obligation for parents. "Don't be clever with us when we ask for aid," Mom yelled back. I was calculating my funds and preparing to leave for college when both of my parents approached me in the kitchen with serious looks. "We've been discussing, and we believe it's time for you to begin contributing to household expenditures," Mom added, with Dad nodding behind her. "You're 14 now, and you earn a nice living, so it's only right that you pay rent." Dad approached with a contract in his hands. "You may either pay $600 per month with utilities, or find another place to live." I glanced at the document Dad was holding, and my thoughts went utterly blank for a moment. The paper had official-looking headers and signature lines. $600 a month plus utilities meant that I'd be spending nearly all of my earnings, leaving nothing for food or emergencies. I quickly calculated the numbers in my thoughts. In a good month, I earned around $700 from my lawn care company and pet sitting. This house's utilities bill increased by at least $200 during the summer when they turned on the air conditioning. That would leave me with around $100 for everything else, including food, clothing, school materials, and mower gas. My parents were watching me as if they expected me to just sign. Mom crossed her arms and Dad held out a pen. I said I needed time to think about it and went to my room before they could protest. Dad called after me for being theatrical, but I closed and shut my door. My hands trembled as I brought out my budget notebook and ran the figures, which confirmed what I already knew. This would demolish all I've created. For the past 2 years I've been quite frugal. I've saved over $1,500 for emergencies and college application expenses. If I paid them rent, my funds would be depleted in 3 months, leaving me with nothing to cover the essentials they stopped supplying. I write out several situations, but they all finish in the same manner. There is no version of this that works without leaving me hungry or losing my business equipment. My eyes are moist, but I'm not sobbing, so the notebook pages are a little blurry. I'm simply upset and afraid, trying to figure out what to do. That night I lie awake on my phone, investigating whether parents may legally charge rent for their underage children. The answers are difficult and vary by state, but most authorities agree that parents have a responsibility to give basic assistance until their children reach the age of 17. Some forums have individuals claiming that when they were adolescents, their parents charged them rent, which was okay. Others believe it is neglect if the parents do not provide food and basics. According to a legal assistance website, parents are responsible for providing their children with shelter, food, clothes, medical treatment, and education. Charging rent may be okay if they are still supplying all of the other necessities, however my parents have not purchased me food in over a year. They have not purchased me clothing since I was 12. I screenshot everything that appears relevant and store it to a folder on my phone. Around 1 a.m., I eventually fell asleep with my phone still in hand. When my alarm goes off, I'm fatigued, and my eyes ache from seeing small print for hours. The next morning, I inform my parents that I won't sign anything until I talk to someone at school about it. We're in the kitchen, and they're having breakfast that they purchased for themselves. Dad's face goes crimson, and he begins ranting about disrespect. He claims I am being ungrateful and that they have every right to charge me rent. Mom gets in, claiming I'm acting like a spoilt brat who believes she's too wonderful to serve her family. Despite my racing heart, I remain cool. I tell them that I just want to make sure I understand everything before signing a formal contract. Dad smacks his coffee mug on the counter, spilling coffee everywhere. He approaches me, but I take my backpack and leave for school early. I can hear him shouting behind me as I go down the driveway, but I don't glance back. My hands shake again as I unlock my bike. The trip to school generally takes 10 minutes, but I finish in about 7 since I'm cycling so hard. I'm hardly paying attention in my morning courses, trying to find out who I can trust with this. My math teacher is teaching something about equations, but I am simply looking at my notepad. In English, we're meant to perform group work, but I inform my group that I'm not feeling well and sit alone. Mrs. Carter, the school counselor, has always been friendly when I've met her in the hallways. So, around lunch I go to her office. The main office secretary inquires whether I have an appointment. I tell her it's an emergency, and she glances at me for a moment before picking up the phone. Mrs. Carter emerges a few minutes later and leads me into her office. She's presumably in her late 30s, has gray hair, and is wearing a cardigan despite the fact that it's warm. Her workplace features plants on the windowsill and encouraging pictures on the walls. Mrs. Carter listens to everything without interrupting, and when I'm finished, she appears really concerned. I tell her about being 12 when they stopped purchasing lunch and supplies, about working since middle school to finance food and clothing, about them ordering takeaway while I ate peanut butter, about the closed pantry, and about Dad's contract that I must sign. She writes in a notepad and nods. After I finish talking, she asks whether I feel comfortable at home and if my parents have ever been physically aggressive, which they have not. She inquires whether they've ever hit me or threatened to injure me. I tell her, no, they've never done that. They just stopped taking care of me financially, and now they want me to pay them. Mrs. Carter's countenance becomes serious, and she taps her pen on the desk. She says that, while she is not a lawyer, charging a kid rent raises severe concerns regarding parental responsibilities. According to her, parents are responsible for their children's fundamental needs until they reach the age of 17. If they charge rent yet do not provide food or clothing, this may be termed neglect. She opens a drawer and takes out several leaflets regarding free legal aid services. She asks if I'd be okay with her making some calls to link me with someone who can provide actual legal counsel. I tell her, yes please. I need help figuring this out. Mrs. Carter takes up her phone and walks outside for a minute. Through the window in her door I can see her chatting to someone and taking notes. When she returns, she informs me that she left a message with legal aid and that they should call back within a day or so. I agree and feel a tremendous weight lift just by giving someone the truth. For the past 2 years I've been handling things on my own and pretending it's normal. Having an adult listen and take me seriously makes me want to cry, but I keep it together. Mrs. Carter also assists me in applying for free lunch directly in her office, something I should have done years ago but was too ashamed. She opens the form on her computer and assists me with filling it out. She thinks there's nothing to be ashamed about and that many pupils utilize the service. The application inquires about household income and family size. Mrs. Carter assists me in explaining that my parents do not offer food money, despite the fact that they live in the house. She submits it online and states that I should be authorized within a few days. When I leave her office, I feel lighter than I have for months. Someone is aware, and assistance is being provided. I am not fully alone anymore. The next day, I meet with Daniel Lawson from Legal Aid, who explains that young children must be provided with food, housing, and basic requirements by their parents. Mrs. Carter scheduled the meeting and took me to the Legal Aid office downtown after school. Daniel seems younger than I imagined, possibly in his early 30s, wearing glasses and a tie. His workplace is tiny, with file boxes packed everywhere. He asks me to sit down and brings out a yellow notebook. He asks that I start from the beginning and tell him everything. I read the entire narrative again, and he takes notes throughout. When I reach to the section concerning the rental agreement, he stops writing and looks up. Charging rent may be deemed neglect if it hinders people from performing their commitments, he argues. He emphasizes that parents are legally obligated to support their underage children. They cannot just decide to stop supplying needs and charge rent instead. Daniel asks extensive questions regarding what my parents provide and what I pay for myself. When I mention everything, food, clothes, school supplies and toiletries, his look becomes more serious. He organizes everything into 2 lists: provided and not provided. The not provided list is much longer. He inquires about their salary and whether they are truly struggling financially, or simply prefer not to spend money on me. I tell him about the sports package, the golf membership, and the restaurant meals, how they had a lot of money until Dad was laid off a few months back. Daniel nods and continues writing. He inquires whether I have any proof of what I'm telling him. I show him images from my phone of their takeaway orders heaped in the garbage while my cabinets were empty, photos of the closed pantry, and my budget notebook, which shows every dollar I've made and spent over the last 2 years. Daniel examines everything attentively, and his jaw tightens. He shuts the notepad and settles back into his chair. Daniel assures me that this record is strong proof and just what we need if things worsen. He says that he may send my parents a formal letter clarifying their legal responsibilities as parents of a minor kid. The letter will highlight particular state legislation pertaining to food, housing, clothes, and basic essentials. It won't compel them to change their ways, but it could make them understand they can't simply push me out or demand all of my money. Daniel claims the letter will be professional and accurate, not threatening, but it will make it obvious that their acts may be deemed neglect. He asks whether I want him to email it, and I quickly agree. Having something formal from a lawyer gives me a sense of security I have never had before. Daniel prints out some information papers regarding my rights and instructs me to continue capturing everything. He also provides me with his direct phone contact in case things escalate rapidly. The meeting finishes with him promising to mail the letter within a few days. That evening, I was cooking up ramen in the microwave when my folks walked into the kitchen. They had that serious expression on their faces again, which indicates that they are going to corner me. Dad crosses his arms and asks whether I've considered the rent contract. I take a deep breath and explain that I spoke with a lawyer from Legal Aid. Mom's face turns paler, and Dad's jaw tightens. I explain that I've learned that parents must provide basic essentials for their children regardless of whether they pay rent. Dad's face goes crimson, and he begins ranting about how I am threatening them and making them appear like awful parents. His voice becomes louder with each phrase, and I can feel my heart racing, but I maintain a cool demeanor. Mom bursts into tears, accusing me of being ungrateful after 14 years of providing for me. She is crying to make me feel bad, but I have seen it too many times to fall for it. Dad approaches and yells, "I'm tearing this family apart over money." I remain cool and explain what Daniel told me. I'm happy to help with household tasks and contribute in acceptable ways, but I won't sign a contract that takes all of my wages. Despite the fact that my hands are shaking, my voice remains firm. I tell them I need the money for food and school supplies because they stopped supplying them years ago. Dad opens his lips to scold again, but I just turn and walk to my room. They are both shrieking about disrespect and ingratitude behind me, but I continue to go. I hear them rush off to their bedroom, slamming the door so fiercely that the entire house shakes. I lock my bedroom door and sit on my bed with my phone, informing Mrs. Carter that the conflict occurred and that I'm okay. She texts back right away, asking if I'm safe, and I say sure, but I'm rattled up. The home is silent for the remainder of the night. The following week passes with my parents rarely speaking to me. Then one afternoon, I'm at school when Daniel's letter arrives via certified mail. I know because when I return home that evening, the entire house seems changed. The air is dense and strained, and my parents sit at the kitchen table, documents strewn out in front of them. They do not glance at me when I walk in. They say nothing. I take a bite from the minimal resources I can find and head directly to my room. In some ways, quiet is worse than screaming. I hear them chatting in low, furious tones during supper, which I typically avoid, but I can't understand what they're saying. This goes on for days, with them treating me as if I'm invisible while simultaneously observing my every move. Mrs. Carter began checking in with me practically every day at lunchtime. She leads me into her office, where we work on creating a realistic timetable that combines school, job, and study time. My grades have been decreasing because I am too weary and anxious to concentrate on my assignments. She writes my instructors, explaining that I am struggling with family concerns, and assists me in obtaining extensions for missed tasks. We figure out which classes require the most attention, and when I can spend my leisure time to catch up. She also links me with the school's homework aid program, which provides free tutoring. Mrs. Carter creates a spreadsheet covering my complete week, including school hours, job shifts, study blocks, and even time for sleep. Seeing everything put out helps me realize how much I've been attempting to do alone. She prints one copy for me and maintains another in case we need to make changes. My neighbor, Mrs. Parker, has noticed that I am taking my lawn equipment to her garage more frequently than normal. One day, as I was storing my mower and trimmer, she came outside and asked whether everything was well at home. I offer her a sketchy response regarding my parents' financial concerns. Mrs. Parker glances at me for a long time, as if she's debating whether to press for additional information. She doesn't push, but her face suggests she understands more than I do. She notes that her garage has plenty of space if I want to store all of my equipment there permanently rather than just sometimes. I thank her and accept the offer, relieved that my pricey instruments are safe from my parents' interference. The next week, Mrs. Parker begins to give me more steady employment. She asks if I can mow her lawn every week rather than every other week, and if I can also help with some garden care. She pays me ahead for the entire month, which allows me to budget better and feel less stressed about money. While I'm working in her yard one Saturday, she offers me lemonade and casually remarks that her guest room is available if I ever need a place to stay. She says it in a lighthearted tone, as if she's simply conversing, yet her eyes are serious. I thank her and say how much I appreciate it. Having that alternative in the back of my mind helps me feel less confined. At home, things worsen in subtle ways. My parents lock the pantry door and begin counting each thing in the refrigerator. They do not legally refuse me food, but they make it plain what I am permitted to touch. Certain shelves in the refrigerator are off limits, and the pantry is closed except when they are present to oversee. It's their technique of managing my diet without breaking any evident restrictions. I go home from work hungry and find the cupboard shut with a note stating that they'll be home at 8. Meanwhile, I can smell their leftover Chinese food in the fridge. But I'm not supposed to touch it. I start capturing everything on my phone, as Daniel instructed. I snap images of the closed pantry with timestamps. I photograph the empty cupboards that I am permitted to enter, revealing that there is virtually nothing there. When my parents order takeaway, I photograph the bags and containers in the garbage. Then I take shots of my own meal, which is generally peanut butter on toast or simple noodles. I took a snapshot of our bank statements, which showed their restaurant charges. Every piece of evidence is saved in a folder on my phone and then backed up to a cloud account that they cannot access. Daniel responded, "Evidence matters if things escalate to court or child services." I never imagined myself creating a case against my own parents, yet here I am, snapping photographs in my own kitchen as if I were gathering evidence for a criminal investigation. Ryan Brooks comes by my register during a slow spell the following shift and leans on the counter. He watches me check my typical lunch items, which are the cheapest in the shop, and then looks at me with an expression of understanding rather than pity. He notes that they have opportunities for extra hours if I'm interested, and the income will assist with whatever I'm going through. I accept quickly since a more consistent income means less worry about paying rent or buying food. He instructs me to come by his office after my shift to complete the paperwork, and I thank him as I pack my crackers and peanut butter. I fill out the documents the same day, and Ryan assists me in updating my work permit to allow for longer hours because I am still 14. The new schedule begins later that week, with 3 weekday evening shifts and entire weekends, resulting in consistent revenue. But it also means less time for schoolwork, and I'm already behind in 2 subjects due to the stress at home. Mrs. Carter spots me falling asleep in study hall and pulls me away to inquire what's going on. I explain about the increased work hours, and she does not lecture me on priorities or advise me to quit my job, as some adults might. Instead, she assists me in creating a study plan that allows me to catch up on tasks throughout every free time and lunch break. She even talks to my instructors about project extensions so I don't become overwhelmed with late work. 3 days later, I get home after an evening job to find Dad standing in the driveway, arms crossed. Before I even get out of my car, he starts ranting about how he knew I was getting free lunch at school. Someone from church must have spotted my name on a list or something since he knows information I never gave him. He accuses me of making them appear like deadbeats who can't even feed their own child, and that my poverty act is insulting to the entire family. I try to move by him toward the home, but he blocks my way and continues to talk about how others at church are surely chatting about how bad their parents must be. His voice becomes louder with each phrase, and I notice Mrs. Parker's porch light turning on across the street. She walks outdoors and stands on her doorstep, arms folded, observing us. Dad spots her standing there and lowers his voice to an angry whisper, but I can see his jaw straining, and his fingers tighten at his sides. He tells me the conversation isn't finished and goes back inside, slamming the door so forcefully that the windows rattle. The next weekend, I return home after cutting lawns to discover my equipment in the center of the yard, thoroughly saturated from the morning shower. My parents insist they had no idea it was going to rain and wanted to move the car out of the garage for errands. But my mower won't start, and when I inspect the engine, I notice water damage that will cost more to repair than the mower is worth. I sit on the damp ground, gazing at my wrecked equipment, and I feel like crying for the first time in months. This mower represented half of my company, and replacing it will require weeks of saving. Mrs. Parker arrives about an hour later and discovers me still sitting there, trying to figure out what to do. She stares at the wrecked mower and then at my parents' car sitting in the driveway, asking no questions about what occurred. She instructs me to bring all of my equipment to her garage right now, and that I may keep everything there permanently so that this never occurs again. I pick up my trimmer and other equipment and accompany her across the street, pleased that at least one adult in my life is willing to assist rather than sabotage me. Back at work, Ryan Brooks invites me into his office and offers me a permanent part-time employment with defined weekly hours and a minor raise. The steadiness allows me to manage my budget rather than scrambling for inconsistent yard job money. Every payday, I can depend on a particular amount to cover my meals and other expenses. He also says that employee discounts extend to groceries, which will make my food budget go much farther. That following week, I was rearranging my room when I noticed Dad searching through my belongings. My bank statements are out of order, and there are fingerprints on the documents in my desk drawer. I approach him about it, and he behaves as if it is his right to know what I am doing with my money because I reside in his home. Daniel's voice lingers in my thoughts as I consider keeping my funds separate. So I go online and set up a prepaid debit card account that only I can access. I transfer the majority of my money and set up direct deposit from work, so my parents can no longer check my income. Daniel stated that documentation is important, and this is an additional layer of security. Someone allegedly approaches Dad directly about the rent problem at church on Sunday morning since he returns home enraged by others chatting about our private affairs. He bangs things around the kitchen, while Mom sits at the table, humiliated and refusing to make eye contact with anybody. She repeating they should never have said anything to anybody, but Dad claims they didn't, implying someone else is speaking. I sit in my room and listen to them dispute over who found out and how to deal with the stories that are now circulating in their social circles. Mrs. Carter sets a mediation meeting at the school on the following Wednesday with my parents, herself, and a district social worker. We all sit around a conference table, and the social worker explains that her role is to assist us in reaching a mutually beneficial arrangement. My parents instantly start complaining about how rude I have been and how I refuse to aid the family at difficult times. Dad brings up every perceived slight from the previous month, while Mom agrees and adds her own instances. The social worker listens intently before redirecting by asking what particular help my parents presently give. The room becomes silent as they try to mention genuine expenses outside the roof over my head. The social worker inquires about food, clothes, and school supplies, and my parents respond vaguely about teaching responsibilities. She asks me directly what I buy for myself, and I detail everything while my parents sit there, looking uncomfortable. After about 45 minutes of back and forth, we strike a temporary deal in which I will not pay rent for the time being, but will contribute by doing additional jobs around the house. The social worker documents everything in detail, including which duties, how frequently, and what my parents agree to offer in exchange. She prints copies for all of us and says, "This is a working agreement we'll revisit in a month." My parents sign it, looking unhappy but agreeable, and I grab my copy, knowing that this piece of paper would provide me with something formal to point to if they try to change the terms later. A few days later, I'm driving home from school and notice Dad packing his golf clubs into someone's car in the driveway. He passes over the clubs and accepts payment from the buyer before watching the automobile drive away with a sorrowful expression on his face. Inside, he is counting money at the kitchen table, and I hear him say something about paying the credit card company before they sue him. He doesn't ask me for money for the entire week, which seems like progress, even though I can sense he's sad over losing his golf equipment. Mom surprises everyone by saying that she has been recruited to work part-time at a retail business in the mall. She starts the next Monday and returns home that first day moaning about standing for 6 hours straight and dealing with nasty clients. Every evening after her shifts, she complains about being fatigued and her feet hurting. But it's strange seeing her work for the first time in years. The additional money is beneficial since we are eating cheaper meals at home more frequently instead of buying takeout. Mom cooks spaghetti with basic sauce, rice and beans, and inexpensive chicken meals. It isn't glamorous, but it means I won't be hiding in my room eating peanut butter sandwiches while they dine at the restaurant. I actually sit at the table with them throughout supper, which hasn't occurred in ages. Mom and I find ourselves alone in the kitchen one evening, cleaning dishes while Dad watches TV. She's scrubbing a pot and suddenly remarks that her parents were quite tight about money while she was growing up. She claims they made her account for every dime and never allowed her to buy anything pleasurable. It's not an apology, and she makes no reference to how she's treated me, but it's the closest she's ever been to explaining why she behaves the way she does. I just nod and continue drying the dishes since I don't know what to say. Dad receives a call for an interview at a warehouse across town, and his entire demeanor shifts. For the first time in weeks, he appears optimistic, discussing wages and perks while browsing the company's website. The anxiety in the house eases slightly as we wait to hear if he advanced to the next round. I used part of my funds to send my lawnmower to the repair shop since the engine has been acting strange. The man fixes it, and I buy better, longer-lasting equipment, a new trimmer and other professional-grade tools. Mrs. Parker sees me unloading everything and offers to let me organize her garage so that all of my business materials are in one location and easily accessible. We spent Saturday afternoon putting up shelves and hanging tools on the wall. She labels everything and even creates a scheduling board so I can see which clients want care each week. At work, Ryan Brooks begins teaching me about payroll and taxes during slow hours when there are few clients. He tells me how to read my pay stub and discusses the withholdings and deductions. He discusses budgeting tactics and how to plan for large costs. He treats me like a true adult employee rather than a child, which feels fantastic after years of being regarded as a burden at home. Daniel calls to check in and see how things are doing with my folks. I inform him about the mediation agreement, and he suggests we make a safety plan in case they try to push me out anyhow. He instructs me to write down Mrs. Parker's phone number, Mrs. Carter's mobile phone number, and the location of a juvenile shelter downtown. He tells exactly what to do if I return home and the locks have been changed or my belongings are vanished. Knowing I have a strategy makes me feel less anxious about what may occur. My parents began cooking at home more frequently. And one day, I realize the pantry's lock is missing. Mom really asks whether I want anything special from the grocery store the next time she visits, which is bizarre. I almost can't believe this is happening. She notes that I favor wheat bread and a certain type of peanut butter. It seems unusual yet fantastic to be able to eat like a normal child. Then I pass by the kitchen counter and notice the cable bill sitting there, with the payment amount highlighted. When I pick it up, I find that the sports package that Dad had canceled a few weeks prior has been reinstated. They're already reverting to their old spending habits after making so much progress by selling the golf clubs and reducing costs. The cost is about $70 more than it was, and they have not even addressed it to me. I put the paper down and walk back to my room, feeling the old irritation rise in my chest. They can't help themselves, even though they should be acquiring better money management skills. A few days later, I'm doing schoolwork in my room when I hear loud noises from the kitchen. Dad is angry over the bank issuing an overdraft warning, and Mom's voice grows louder, stating she had no idea the account was that low. I open my door and hear Dad accuse her of overspending at Target, while she responds with his bar tab from last weekend. They go back and forth, recounting every purchase the other person made, with neither accepting responsibility for their own expenses. The dispute lasts approximately 45 minutes before they both storm off to their own rooms, and I realize they have learnt nothing from the previous several weeks. The next morning, Dad approaches me before school and begins discussing how the home costs are rising. He thinks I should start contributing since the bills are too much for the two of them to bear. I take out my phone and show him a snapshot of our written agreement from the mediation meeting, the one that states no rent until I am 17. He goes crimson in the face, but I remain calm and inform him that we have already agreed on conditions. He mutters something about ungrateful children and goes away, but I can see he has other plans. That evening, Mom approaches me in the hallway with a phony, cheery look and begins discussing a new method she devised. She suggests that instead of calling it rent, we utilize chore credits, in which I earn points for domestic activities that contribute toward covering bills. I stare at her for a second before responding. That sounds exactly like rent with extra steps. And the answer remains no. Her grin fades and she huffs off to whine to Dad about how tough I am. I walk to my room and write Daniel about what just transpired. He answers within minutes, telling me to start documenting everything in detail. I open a new note on my phone and start writing down what food is now in the cabinets, when time my parents bought pizza for supper while I ate cereal, and images of the money they left on the counter to demonstrate their spending habits. Daniel responded, "If we need to escalate the situation, having solid evidence will protect you from their version of events." Every day, I make records, noting when they order takeaway, when the pantry contains food that I may use, and any comments they make about money or my alleged commitments. The documenting makes me feel less helpless since I'm creating a record of what actually happens rather than what they pretend. 3 days later, I'm at school when Mrs. Carter summons me to her office and displays an email she's writing to my parents. The message is professional and kind, but the warning is clear. If the agreed-upon requirements of our mediation are breached in any manner, she must file a formal report with Child Welfare Services. She asks whether I'm good with her mailing it, and I say yes, knowing my parents would be outraged but also understanding they need this boundary maintained by someone in charge. She presses submit as I'm sitting there, and I watch the email escape into the ether, bound for my parents' inbox, where it will undoubtedly spark an explosion. That Saturday, I was working my shift at the grocery store, replacing shelves in the cereal aisle, when I noticed Dad walking through the front doors. My stomach lowers because he's not here to shop, judging by the furious expression on his face and the way he scans the store for me. He notices me and goes straight over, his voice rising as he rants about how I'm making them look like bad parents and turning everyone against them. Customers are stopping to stare, and I can feel my face flaming with humiliation as he continues to shout about ingratitude and contempt. Ryan Brooks emerges from the back room and goes forward gently, putting himself between me and Dad. He informs my father, in a forceful but courteous tone, that he must leave the store. Dad starts claiming that he has the right to speak to his own daughter. Ryan does not back down. He just emphasizes that he must go immediately or Ryan will contact the police for making a disturbance. Dad appears to want to dispute further, but something in Ryan's expression causes him to spin around and rush out, throwing the door wide so forcefully that it smacks against the wall. I'm shaking so much that I have to sit on a step stool, and Ryan and Jessica walk over to check on me. Ryan responds, "You did nothing wrong, and we have your back completely," as Jessica takes out the incident report form and begins writing down everything that happened, including timings and details. She informs me, matter-of-factly, that if Dad returns to the business, they will not hesitate to contact the police for trespassing. Knowing they're serious about protecting me makes me feel more secure than I have in months. After my shift, I went directly to Mrs. Carter's house because she provided me her address for emergencies. I tell her everything about the shop incident. Her expression becomes more disturbed as I speak, and when I finish, she says she has to file that complaint with child welfare right away, since my father coming up to my employment to confront me crosses a significant line. The next day, a woman called Ms. Donovan contacts my mobile phone and presents herself as a caseworker, stating that she wants to organize a house visit to examine the issue. My entire body feels chilled and relieved since I sought assistance, but I'm also concerned about what occurs next, and whether this will exacerbate the situation. Ms. Donovan organizes the visit for Thursday afternoon, saying she'll need to talk with me privately, check the house and go over some financial information with my parents. When I notify my parents about the visit, they jump into panic mode. Mom begins deep cleaning each area as if we were prepared for a military inspection, scouring baseboards and arranging closets that had not been touched in years. Dad advises her on what to say, preparing responses about how they offer everything I need and saying that I'm overreacting to regular family arguments. I listen to them practice their version of events and decide not to participate in any of it. When Ms. Donovan arrives on Thursday, I want to give her the truth gently and let her form her own judgments based on facts rather than my parents' spin. Thursday arrives, and Ms. Donovan arrives on time. A lady in her 40s with a professional but kind approach, carrying a tablet and briefcase. She starts by asking all three of us basic questions about our household and daily habits. She then begs to talk with me alone in my room. I show her my budget notebook, my documentation of food availability and spending habits, and bill photographs from my phone. She doesn't appear startled or judgmental. She just takes notes and asks clarifying questions about particular incidences and timings. After speaking with me for over an hour, she goes through the house room by room, inspecting the pantry and fridge and taking her own photographs. Finally, she sits down with my parents in the living room, and I am invited to join them. Ms. Donovan speaks plainly and clearly, informing my parents that charging rent to a minor kid is wrong and may constitute neglect of their legal obligations. She says that they must guarantee that I have regular access to food and other essentials, and she will be monitoring the situation through follow-up visits. My parents nod and agree to everything she says, their faces a combination of shame and disdain, but I can tell they understand she's not offering suggestions, she's establishing rules they must obey. Ms. Donovan packs her tablet and folder and proceeds to the door, my parents following her with tight grins. The moment her car pulls away from the curb, her phony friendliness vanishes. Mom rushes directly to the cupboard and removes the lock without saying anything, throwing it away with more force than required. Dad takes out his phone and begins reading through employment postings while sitting at the kitchen table, his mouth tight. Neither of them looks at me or recognizes what has happened, but I can feel their rage permeating every part of the home. Over the following several days, they buy food and put them where I can find them, but they arrange the goods in a planned manner, as if they want me to know they're only doing this because they have to. Mom sighs loudly every time she puts food in the fridge, while Dad mutters under his breath about government overreach and individuals who don't mind their own business. The rent contract disappears off the counter, but no one discusses it, as if pretending it never existed could somehow resolve the matter. I maintain my paperwork up to date nevertheless, taking images of the open pantry and stocked fridge in case things change again. 2 weeks after Ms. Donovan's visit, Dad begins his warehouse work on the night shift loading trucks. He departs for work around 9 p.m. He returns home at 6 a.m., resting the most of the day before waking up to eat dinner and go again. Everything he does reflects his fatigue, from his slower movements to how he falls asleep on the couch before his alarm goes off. The good news is that he's too weary to start conflicts over money or anything else, making the nights more peaceful than they've been in months. Mom appears pleased to have him out of the home at night, and she stops walking on eggshells, waiting for the next argument to begin. I returned home from school one afternoon to find Mom seated at the kitchen table, worksheets spread out in front of her. She notes that her work provides free financial literacy seminars during lunch breaks, and she has decided to attend one. The spreadsheets include basic budgeting, cost tracking, and saving objectives, all of which I learned years ago out of need. But seeing Mom actively engaged with the content and taking notes surprised me because she has never exhibited an interest in money management before. She asks me a few questions about how I track my business's income and spending, and for the first time, we have a normal talk about money without anybody becoming defensive or upset. It doesn't solve everything, but it feels like a modest step towards something better. My daily routine will settle into a regular rhythm during the following month. I get up, go to school, work my afternoon shift at the grocery store, return home to finish schoolwork, do my allotted duties, and go to bed at a fair hour. The consistency means I'm no longer always weary, and my grades are gradually returning to where they were before the stress. Teachers note the change, and a few express their delight to see me performing better. I'm not always calculating how to stretch $25 or wondering if there'll be food when I get home. Life isn't ideal, and my parents still scarcely communicate with me beyond basic domestic tasks, but it's predictable, and I can concentrate on school and job without constantly managing crises. Mrs. Parker texted me on Saturday morning, asking if I wanted to spend the weekend at her house to rest and decompress. She claims her husband is visiting his sister and she would appreciate the companionship. Plus, she is aware that things have been stressful in my place. I ask my parents and expect them to make a huge issue about it, but Dad simply shrugs and says, "All right," and Mom nods without looking up from her budgeting spreadsheet. I pack a suitcase and stroll over to Mrs. Parker's house that afternoon, feeling lighter as I move away from my own front door. The weekend turned out to be just what I needed. 2 days of watching movies, assisting Mrs. Parker with some gardening work and eating meals without any stress in the air. She doesn't ask about my home situation, but she makes it clear that I'm welcome at her house whenever I need a break. Sunday evening, I return home feeling utterly energized and prepared to face whatever comes next. About 2 weeks later, Ms. Donovan arrives for her follow-up visit and sits with all three of us in the living room. She goes over her notes from the initial visit and asks specific questions regarding food access, my academic achievement, and home costs. My parents respond graciously, showing her the open pantry, filled refrigerator, and Mom's budget spreadsheets. Ms. Donovan is happy with the progress, but she reminds everyone that the case remains open for further monitoring, and she plans to check in on a regular basis over the next few months. After she goes, my parents resume their silent displeasure, but they make no changes, apparently knowing that Ms. Donovan was not giving suggestions. I met with Mrs. Carter for lunch one day to discuss my plans for junior and senior year. She cites a dual enrollment program, which allows high school students to take college classes at the community college while both receiving high school and college credit. The program covers tuition and provides subsidies for books and transportation. Mrs. Carter assists me in filling out the application immediately in her office and produces a good reference letter showcasing my work ethic and academic progress. I submit everything before the deadline and try not to get my expectations up too high, but the prospect of getting a head start on college while still in high school seems like just the chance I need. About a week after I submit the application, Mom approaches me in the kitchen and asks if I might lend them money for an unforeseen auto repair. Dad stands behind her, nodding, and they both have the same frantic expression I remember from when Dad first lost his job. I inform them I can draft a formal loan agreement outlining the amount, interest rate and payback period so that everyone is on the same page. I take out my laptop and begin typing a simple contract while they watch. Their looks morph from optimistic to uneasy, and Dad eventually replies, "Never mind. We'll figure something else out." They walk away, and I keep the blank loan agreement form for future use, knowing that putting everything in paper protects both them and me. The next weekend, I notice the large TV has disappeared from the living room. Mom adds that they sold it to help pay off their credit card debt, and Dad canceled the costly sports package permanently. The living room appears empty without the large screen, and I can tell they both despise having made these modifications. But it's actual progress toward getting their finances in order, even if they plainly despise every step. Dad moans about missing his games, while Mom often emphasizes how little the old TV in their bedroom is in comparison to what they previously had. I don't mention that these are the types of sacrifices I've been making since I was 12, since it would just spark another battle. 2 months after completing my application, I receive an email informing me that I have been accepted into the dual enrollment program and would receive a full scholarship to cover my books and transportation fees. Beginning next September, I'll spend my mornings taking college classes at the community college and my afternoons completing high school prerequisites. The acceptance letter offers details on course choices and orientation dates. I print it out and present it to my parents, thinking they will be proud or at least recognize it as an accomplishment. Dad looks at it and says, "That's good," while Mom nods and explains how it will save them money for education later. Their reactions sting a little since this is a huge event and I worked hard to make it happen, but I'm learning not to look for affirmation from them. A week later, we all sit down at the kitchen table with a written paper that clearly states everything. No rent until I turn 17. My responsibilities include taking out the garbage on Tuesdays and Thursdays, doing my own washing, and assisting with meal preparation 3 evenings each week. Food access implies that the pantry and refrigerator remain unsecured, allowing me to consume whatever is available without seeking permission. My employment income belongs to me, and I am not obliged to contribute to home expenses. Mom reads it again, and Dad moves in his chair, appearing uncomfortable, but he does not object. We all sign at the bottom, and I take a photo with my phone before Mom drives me to school to give Mrs. Carter the original for her files. Mrs. Carter takes it over and approves before storing it in a folder with my name on it. She instructs me to notify her immediately if anything changes or if my parents attempt to amend the conditions without my consent. The next Thursday, we eat supper together at the normal time, with baked chicken and rice cooked by Mom using store-bought ingredients. Dad discusses a situation in the warehouse with a forklift that broke down. Mom describes a tough customer at her retail job who wanted to return an item without a receipt. I tell them about a quiz I performed well on in history class and a new client who wants weekly lawn treatment beginning in the spring. Nobody screams, mentions money, or makes disparaging remarks about my clothes or meals. It's not warm, and we're not laughing or sharing deep thoughts, but we're sitting together, eating a meal, and chatting about ordinary things with no stress in the air. After supper, I assist load the dishwasher as per the arrangement, and then retire to my room to complete my schoolwork. Looking ahead, I sense something I haven't felt in years. Cautious hope for my circumstances. Mrs. Carter checks in regularly, and Ms. Donovan does monthly house visits. I have a clear path to college thanks to the dual enrollment program, which begins next autumn. Even though they still detest the scrutiny, my parents are better at managing their money now that someone is keeping them accountable. I've learned to stand up for myself when required, and that asking for help does not imply weakness or helplessness. Things aren't great with my parents, and they probably never will be, but I'm forging a future that doesn't rely on them being constant or abruptly changing personalities. Given where we started, that seems to be the best end I could hope for.